Let's talk about the unspoken reality of post-separation abuse. Navigating the aftermath of a separation is never easy. For some, it unveils a sinister reality that often goes unspoken. Post-separation abuse. Post-separation abuse transcends physical violence. There's emotional manipulation, control, and intimidation. In this episode, my goal is to shed light on the unspoken reality of post-separation abuse and expose the shadows that victim survivors often endure in silence. Post-separation abuse wears various masks, and it can be challenging to recognise, from ongoing harassment through text messages and phone calls to calculated attempts to sabotage a person's professional and private life. Abusers often use increasingly covert tactics in order to gain and maintain control. It also extends beyond the legal realm and can seep into a victim survivor's personal and emotional well-being. Unlike the visible scars of physical abuse, the harm caused by psychological warfare is often invisible. Gaslighting, manipulation, and mind games are the tools used to torment victim survivors, leaving many victim survivors questioning their reality. The emotional toll can be profound, and it can make the journey to recovery even more arduous. Post-separation abuse doesn't only affect adults. The repercussions also extend to any children that are shared by the separating couple. Witnessing a parent enduring abuse can leave lasting impacts on a child, and breaking this often intergenerational cycle requires not only protecting adult victim survivors, but also creating a safe environment for children. And this is something that can be incredibly challenging when you are separating from someone who is controlling and possibly abusive in other ways as well. Victim survivors of post-separation abuse often find themselves entangled in a complex legal battle. Sometimes it's necessary for victim survivors to obtain an intervention order or similar, but even with legal protections, the emotional toll persists. The legal system must improve to better support victim survivors and better address the subtle, covert and nuanced nature of post-separation abuse. One of the most challenging aspects of post-separation abuse is that it's often suffered in silence. Victim survivors often hesitate to speak out because there can be a lot of fear and shame and social stigma. Breaking this silence is one very important step towards healing, but as a community, we need to create an environment where victim survivors feel empowered and supported to share their stories without judgment. And part of our role in creating that environment of safety is acknowledging that abuse can happen to anyone, and often the perpetrator is someone that you like. It can be someone who is your neighbour, is your child's teacher, is your doctor. There is a real misconception that family violence and ongoing post-separation abuse is only perpetrated by people who have drug and alcohol addiction or who look like they're an abuser or a criminal. And the truth is the exact opposite. The truth is that the vast majority of the women that I work with are highly educated, skilled professionals, and so are the men who are abusing them. As we unveil the unspoken reality of post-separation abuse, it's so important to remember that everyone's journey is unique. But by acknowledging the existence of this pervasive issue, we can work collectively to dismantle the barriers that silence victim survivors. We can create an environment, a community, where victim survivors can find support and the strength to rebuild their lives. Breaking the silence is the first step towards a future that is free from the shadows of post-separation abuse. With my own experience of post-separation abuse, it took me a really long time to work out what it was that was going on. I just didn't understand why the conflict was at the level that it was after separation. In my mind, before separation, understandably, I was thinking, you know what, let's separate, this dynamic between us, it's clearly not working. And as what is similar with many victim survivors of family violence, I was under the impression that things were my fault. That's what I'd been told, that I was the one that was, pushing the buttons, so to speak. And I thought that with separation, everything would be okay. We would be able to co-parent pleasantly, if nothing else, and rebuild our lives, albeit apart from one another. That was not how things ended up going. And I endured almost 15 years of post-separation abuse. Part of what made my own journey so much harder was the lack of information and the lack of understanding around post-separation abuse. There is in the community, including amongst professionals that work in the separation and divorce space, a very pervasive view that when the relationship ends, the control will end, the abuse will end. It's not true. It is just categorically not true. When someone has a desire to have complete control over you, that is not going to stop. That doesn't stop just because you're no longer living under the one roof. Unfortunately, it often manifests as financial control, continued coercive control, and if you share children with someone who's abusive and controlling, they will then often direct their focus wholly or in part to the children. Someone who may have been a very disinterested parent, not actively involved with very much of the day-to-day heavy lifting of parenting, a controlling, abusive person will then suddenly decide that they can't be without the children at least half of the time. Children get treated by abusive people as though they are either possessions or extensions of themselves. There's an understanding that by having increased time with the children, that they will also then get increased access to you, which unfortunately is true. The more care of the children that the other parent has, the more communication there needs to be between parents. And it's for this reason that equal shared care arrangements, where there has been a history of abuse, and particularly where there's ongoing control and abuse, those equal shared parenting arrangements are extremely problematic and, in my view, are in nobody's best interests. Coming back to the theme of the unspoken reality of post-separation abuse is the fact that when we're talking about equal shared parenting arrangements, or when we're talking about a controlling, abusive parent who is seeking additional time with children, there tends to be a view from the community as a whole and from other professionals that are involved, so for example lawyers, there tends to be a view that, this parent is seeking this much extra time because they love the kids, because they want to be an active parent. And I'm calling bullshit. I am calling bullshit. When you have a parent who has been largely disinterested, largely uninvolved, largely absent, and there has been family violence, oftentimes coercive control for years and years and years, any sudden interest in parenting and time with the children after separation is a massive red flag and should be scrutinised very, very carefully. All professionals need to maintain healthy scepticism. And the fact that this currently isn't the case is a huge problem. Children are being put at risk, and victim survivors are being put in a situation where they are having to communicate constantly with ex-partners who are continuing to control and abuse them. Now, this is a topic that you can probably tell I'm very passionate about, and we'll be touching on this in further episodes of this podcast, along with other ways in which post-separation abuse can manifest. And again, they're often subtle and they're often misinterpreted by outside professionals. So we've just spoken now about how seeking increased time with children, on the face of it, that can seem very innocent and it can just seem like it's a parent who's wanting to be more actively involved. But it's that dark underbelly that needs to be looked at, that needs to be acknowledged, that needs to have light shone on it, along with other things that can occur, other things that all too often are viewed as being innocent by outsiders. A big part of the reason that I do the work that I do as a specialist divorce and protective parenting coach is because I felt so alone in my own journey. I felt that no one really understood or saw what it was that I was experiencing. My goal is to shine a light on what's hiding in the darkness when it comes to family violence and ongoing post-separation abuse, both to support victim survivors and also to help educate professionals who are working in the space of separation, divorce and co-parenting. If this episode has raised any concerns for you, if you are located within Australia, I urge you to make contact with 1-800-RESPECT. If you're located somewhere else in the world, I strongly recommend that you find out the support service for your country or local area that can help you navigate things like domestic violence, family violence, or other forms of abuse.
There's a moment where the noise stops landing, where the chaos loses its hold.
That's it for today's episode of the Post-Separation Abuse Podcast. If you found this helpful, you'll love the Post-Separation Parenting Blueprint, the foundation of everything that my team and I teach, now available to all protective parents. Whether you work with us one-on-one or navigate your journey independently, the blueprint is where everyone starts. Whether you're thinking about separating, in the early stages of separation, wanting to avoid your kids being trapped with unsafe or inappropriate care arrangements, or perhaps needing to challenge and change current arrangements, and even if you're currently in the court system for parenting matters. I created the blueprint as a gift to all of my fellow protective parent warriors because the journey of being a change maker and a cycle breaker can't be done alone, and the blueprint is the one post-separation parenting resource that gets it right. Child development, safety and well-being put first, with the evidence to back it up. The blueprint gives you the same strategic frameworks that my team and I use in private one-on-one coaching, and it's available on an online platform for you to access whenever and wherever you need. You can also ensure that you're up to date with any new announcements by checking in regularly to the website danielleblackcoaching.com.au. Until next time, take care, and please always remember, you are your child's greatest protector.
Protect you, lead you, rise with fire. This isn't revenge, this is design. A future rewritten line by line. You don't burn it down, you build it right with wisdom, strategy, and quiet mind.